He bought a ghost town for $70 at auction, and found a widow with her 3 children still there. Snow swept down Copper Hollow's main street like a white river, swallowing the last lamplight. Samuel Hart stood in the doorway of the old hotel, rifle steady, breath clouding in the cold. Inside, Margaret Lane gathered her 3 children close. Evan with his jaw set, Emma gripping her brother's hand, little Jamie half hidden in her skirts. The wind carried a sound that made Sam's gut tighten. Hooves, deliberate and slow. Out of the swirling dark, 3 riders emerged. Their leader, Roy Cutter, sat high in the saddle, his long coat snapping in the wind, eyes fixed on the hotel. "Evening, Margaret," he called, voice hard as ice. "I've come for what's mine. You know where the gold is." A year before this night in Copper Hollow, Samuel Hart's world had been stripped down to its bare bones. The land he worked, the tools in his shed, the stubborn strength in his hands. These were all he had left. His wife, Lillian, had died in the spring, taken by a fever that came on quick and burned through her in 3 days. They had no children, no kin nearby, no neighbors close enough to share a morning greeting. After the funeral, Sam found himself talking less and listening more to the wind, the groan of the barn roof in a storm, the long, dry sigh of the prairie grass when the heat was too much for it. He avoided town except for the bare necessities: flour, coffee, nails for mending fence. Folks had learned not to try and pull him into their conversations at the mercantile. His eyes had a way of making it clear he was elsewhere, even while standing right in front of them. The farm was failing. The soil had grown tired, and so had Sam. Corn came up thin, beans stunted, wheat yellowed before it could ripen. Each season, he calculated whether there was enough to make it to the next, and each season the answer grew shakier. The roof leaked, the well pump groaned like an old mule, and the firewood pile was a shadow of what a proper Colorado winter would require. It was during one of those trips into Denver, late summer, sky low with the threat of rain, that he'd wandered into the county auction. He hadn't planned to buy anything. He'd gone in for nails and lamp oil, maybe a sack of feed. But in the courthouse square, the auctioneer's voice cut through the murmurs of the crowd, calling out lots that were little more than the bones of what they'd once been. Foreclosed buildings, abandoned parcels, rusted tools left behind when their owners lit out for someplace easier. Lot 42 was Copper Hollow. Not the mine. The mine had been stripped and sealed years ago, but the town itself, a cluster of empty buildings, their false fronts still pretending to be a thriving main street. The saloon with its swinging doors hanging crooked. The blacksmith shop, its forge long cold. The old hotel, 3 stories high, windows boarded. A place where the wind sounded like whispers moving from room to room. The auctioneer opened at $100. No one raised a hand. He dropped to $80. Still nothing. Sam found himself listening harder as the price fell, picturing all that dry timber. Floors, beams, staircases that could be taken apart and burned. At $70, he lifted his hand without thinking it through. Sold to Mr. Hart. The gavel rang. He told himself it wasn't a foolish purchase. $70 for enough lumber to keep his stove fed all winter was a bargain. He'd haul it piece by piece, maybe keep the walls standing until spring, in case he could sell it again to some prospector who'd caught wind of a new strike. But the truth was, he didn't think about the future when he bid. He thought about the emptiness of his farm, the silence in his house, and the strange pull he felt toward that weathered cluster of buildings waiting for someone, anyone, to walk its streets again. A week later, he hitched his team and headed into the mountains. The road narrowed and bent like it had been laid by a man guessing his way through the rocks. Aspens shook their coins of gold in the wind. The higher he climbed, the quieter the world became, until it was just the creak of the wagon, the clop of hooves, and the long blue shadow of the ridge ahead. Copper Hollow sat in a bowl between 2 steep slopes, its buildings leaning as if tired of standing watch over nothing. Snow lingered in the shadows even though it was only early autumn. Sam walked down the main street, noting where the wood was sound and where rot had chewed too deep for salvage. The hotel caught his eye right away, bigger than the others, its front steps still solid under his weight. He didn't expect anyone to be there. The place had been empty for nearly a decade, since the last of the miners drifted away. But as he passed, he thought he saw a faint smear of smoke against the pale sky. He stopped, listening. The air was still enough that the sound of his own breathing seemed loud. Then, so faint he almost missed it. A single creak, as if a board had been stepped on somewhere inside. Sam's first thought was animals, raccoons, maybe, or a bear getting ready for winter. He pushed the door open and stepped into the dim, cold air of the lobby. Dust lay thick on the counter, the floor, the chairs that sat as if waiting for guests who would never come. But beyond the front desk, in the open doorway to the dining room, a fire burned low in the grate. He moved toward it quietly, his boots making the old floor complain. That's when he saw her, Margaret Lane, standing by the hearth with a poker in her hand. She was younger than he'd expected, maybe 35, with the kind of weariness in her eyes that doesn't come from age alone. Behind her, at a long table, sat 3 children. The oldest boy, Evan, watched Sam like a hawk sizing up a threat. The girl, Emma, sat straight-backed, her hands folded tight in her lap. The youngest, Jamie, clung to his sister's sleeve, eyes wide and unblinking. Margaret didn't ask who he was. She didn't lower the poker. "You lost?" she asked. "No," Sam said. "Bought the town at auction. Came to see what I'd gotten myself into." Something in her shoulders eased, but not much. "Well, you found what's left of it." He glanced at the children, then back at her. "Didn't expect anyone to be here. Most folks don't." She turned back to the fire, jabbing at the embers. "We keep to ourselves." Sam thought about leaving then, just turning around and letting her keep her secrets. But the smell of the room stopped him. Not the wood smoke, that was good, clean pine, but the faint sourness of a meal stretched too far, of hunger that had been ignored too long. "Winter'll come early up here," he said. "You got enough put by?" Her hand tightened on the poker. "We'll manage." It wasn't an answer, not really. But Sam knew better than to push. He'd been on the receiving end of pity before, and he knew how it stung. Still, he walked back out into the cold with the image of that half-starved family lodged in his mind, like a splinter he couldn't dig out. In the days that followed, as he began pulling usable planks from the old saloon and stacking them in the wagon, he kept glancing toward the hotel. Some mornings he'd see smoke from the chimney, other days nothing. By the end of the first week, he'd started bringing small things to leave on the hotel porch. Split logs, a sack of flour, a jar of beans. No note, no knock, just enough to help them last another day. He told himself it was nothing, just neighborly, just making sure no one froze to death in a building he technically owned now. But as the nights grew colder and the passes started icing over, Sam realized he was watching that chimney like a man watching the horizon for a ship that might never come. On the 3rd morning, a wind came down off the ridge with teeth in it, and the hotel's chimney went cold. Sam noticed the missing ribbon of smoke while he was prying nails from the saloon's back wall. He stood on the ladder, squinting through breath frost, and felt a small, hard knot of worry form beneath his ribs. He told himself it wasn't his business. Then he climbed down, loaded 2 armfuls of split pine into the wagon, and drove toward the hotel anyway. The front doors were shut. A drift curled against them like a sleeping dog. He rapped twice with his knuckles. No answer. He was turning away when he heard a scrape, boot leather on wood, and a whisper that sounded like a warning. The lock slid back. Evan Lane's face appeared in the narrow opening, cheeks chapped, eyes a blue that could cut. "What do you want?" "Brought wood." Sam kept his voice even. "Storm coming. Roads'll glass over. We don't need charity." Behind the boy, a cough uncoiled, dry, barking, too big for a small body. Sam felt the wind find his wrists and slide up his sleeves. He nodded toward the noise. "Sounds like someone needs hot air and something warm to drink." Evan didn't move. "We pay our own way." Sam set the wood down on the porch. "Then pay me by opening the door so I can set these by the stove. I'll take the empty sack with me." A pause. Margaret's voice came from deeper in the lobby. "Let him through, Evan." Inside, the air was sharp with cold. The stove in the dining room had a few embers sulking under ash. Sam knelt, built a small teepee of kindling, coaxed life into it with a twist of paper and his breath. Fire caught with a soft rush and the room began to remember what warmth was. Jamie lay on a pallet near the hearth. His hair stuck to his forehead, the cough raking him again. Emma sat beside him, the heel of her hand pressed gently to his back each time his small body shook. She looked up at Sam without flinching. "Do you know willow bark?" she asked. "We boiled the last of ours. Got some in the wagon," he said. "And honey, not much." He glanced at Margaret. "Won't fix the world, but it'll soothe his throat." Margaret's eyes were steady, but the lines around them told on her. "You've done enough." "That boy says different," Sam answered and went to fetch the satchel. He brewed willow and mint in a dented kettle, held the cup while Jamie's hands trembled around it, and listened to the cough lose some of its barbs. When the child slept, the room loosened a little. Snow ticked against the windows. Somewhere in the upper floors a shutter clapped and fell still. "You said you bought the town," Margaret said. "Why?" "Wood," Sam replied. "Timber I can burn or sell. Didn't come looking for company." "Neither did we." Emma rose to rinse the cup. Evan shadowed her, protective without being told. Sam watched the way the siblings moved, practiced tight like people who'd learned to carry plates across a floor that might buckle. "You from here?" he asked, not pushing, simply placing the question on the table. "We're from wherever my husband isn't buried," Margaret said, and the courage it took to say it made Sam look at her a second time. "He died last spring. Since then we keep our heads down." Sam nodded once, accepting the boundary. "You've got enough flour for 3 days," he said, eyes taking in the open sack, the line of the scoop. "Beans for 2. Salt's out. Lamp oil's near gone." "You inventory our kitchen often?" "Just now." "We'll manage," she repeated. "Winter doesn't bargain," Sam said. "It takes what you pretend you don't owe." He didn't stay for thanks. He brought in a crate. Flour, a little rice, beans he'd soaked and dried last summer, 2 tin candles that would gutter and stink but cast light. He left them near the stove. On his way out, Emma touched his sleeve. Her hand was cold and sure. "Thank you," she said, simple as a prayer not meant for anyone to hear. "Keep the door barred at night," Sam told her. "Sound carries strange in hollows." That afternoon he tore more lumber from the saloon and didn't think about the hotel. At dusk, he found himself listening for Jamie's cough and didn't hear it. He made a fire in the old jail and cooked a pot of stew heavy with onion. When it was done, he took half to the hotel and left it on the porch with a spoon and a folded scrap of paper that said nothing but "Eat while it's hot." He'd never had a talent for words. The next day, Margaret appeared at the edge of the street with the empty pot washed clean. She didn't step onto the saloon's porch. "You don't owe us this." "I know." He set a beam across sawhorses, squared the end. "And yet," she studied him the way people study a sky they don't trust. "We don't want trouble." "Me neither." She almost smiled at that. Almost. Trouble doesn't ask what we want. Evan came after her, a string of rabbits in his grip, traps dangling from his shoulder. He stopped beside Sam's wagon and appraised the axe, the saw, the clean nest of tools laid out in order. "You cut the roof straight," he said. "Most men don't notice the grain." "Most boys don't either," Sam said. "I'm not most boys." Heat colored Evan's face at his own boldness. He cleared his throat. "I can help. For pay." Sam shook his head. "Keep your pay for lamp oil. But I'll trade you 4 straight boards for 4 straight truths about this place." Evan glanced at his mother. Margaret said nothing. Silence here often meant permission. "The wind comes mean through the north alley," Evan said at last. "Stack wood on the lee side or it'll drift you in." Second truth. "The hotel's south wall is fine till the thaw. The mortise is rotten on the corner post." Third. "There's a cistern behind the livery if you chip the ice careful." Fourth. He swallowed, and the bravado fell away. Fourth is there's a man coming who thinks everything belongs to him. The word sat between them and altered the room like change in barometric pressure. Sam did not look at Margaret. He looked at the boy, because it matters to tell truth to someone who can bear it. "Name him," Sam said. "Roy Cutter," Evan answered. "My father's partner once. He says Ma's got gold that's his." Sam felt his jaw set before he told it to relax. "Does she?" No, Evan's certainty was a wire drawn tight. "But he believes what wanting makes him believe." Margaret's voice came quiet. "We'll handle it." "How?" Sam asked, not challenging, only asking the question he would have to answer for himself if he turned away. "Same way we've handled everything since Thomas died," she said. "We keep the doors barred and the lamps dim. We hope Roy finds someone else to bully. We pray the passes close before he gets here." Sam thought of the empty roads, the way snow could hide a man's tracks but not his intent. He thought of the $70 receipt folded in his breast pocket. The ink that said Copper Hollow now belonged to him, and the responsibility he'd pretended was only lumber and nails. He thought of Lillian's hands, how she'd once pressed them to a fevered brow that wasn't kin because a child had been crying in the next cabin over. "Praying's good work," he said, "but firewood and flour do their share." He started mending the hotel's south wall that afternoon. Evan fetched nails and learned the hum of a steady hammer. Emma patched a draft with burlap and twine like she'd been born to it. Jamie, improved, followed Sam like a small shadow and asked questions that were heavier than his breath. How long until the snow stopped? How heavy a door should be if you mean it to keep wolves out? Whether wolves always wore fur. "Sometimes," Sam told him, and Jamie looked toward his mother and understood more than a child should. When the light failed, Sam made one last trip to Denver. The pass was already icing. His team labored. He bought lamp oil, sugar, a little salt pork, blankets too thin for what was coming but better than nothing. At the counter, he picked up a coil of new rope and a box of cartridges and laid them down again. He wasn't here to start a fight. He was here to make sure one didn't end the wrong way. He returned under a bruise-colored sky and found a pair of tracks printed deep at the mouth of the hollow. Not his, not the family's. A scout's, he thought. A man measuring distance with his eyes and with his hunger. Sam laid canes of willow across the path to the hotel. Ankle height, placed where a careless boot would snap them, and brushed snow back over. He didn't like traps. He liked warnings. Margaret met him in the lobby with a set of keys he hadn't seen before. Iron, old, looped on a ring. "I found these in the manager's desk. You should keep them." "I will," she said, and tucked them away. They ate together that night for the first time. A thin stew made thicker by talk that didn't pretend the world was kinder than it was. Emma told how the wind sounded when it came down the staircase. Evan asked about fence knots and where to place a brace post. Margaret spoke mostly with her hands. Quiet movements that arranged bowls and gathered crumbs and told Sam more about her than any confession would. When they finished, she said, "If Roy comes, he will come for me first. That's what men like him do. Men like him often forget how much a family weighs when it stands together," Sam said. He kept his voice flat. He wasn't promising victory. He was promising presence. The next morning, a rifle shot cracked against the ridge. One shot. Not echo, not accident. Evan flinched. Emma stood very still. Jamie went white around the mouth. "Rabbit," Sam said, though he didn't believe it. "Or a man letting us know he can reach the ridgeline." Margaret's hand tightened on the back of a chair. "Roy has a way of turning distance into threat." Sam stepped to the doorway and looked out at the street. Snow was falling in careful flakes, each flake an argument for silence. He saw no riders. He saw, faintly, the willow cane he'd set across the path. Broken in two, the ends pressed flat by a heel. He turned back to Margaret. "You were hiding," he said, no unkindly. "Now you're seen." Her chin lifted. "We were seen the day we buried Thomas. We've just been pretending otherwise." Sam considered the room. Its stove, its cracked windows, the 4 people who had made it warm again by refusing to give up. He thought of the deed in his pocket and the peculiar weight of owning a town no one else wanted. Then he said the only sentence that felt honest. I won't leave you here to winter alone. Evan's head came up. Emma's shoulders loosened. Jamie began to breathe like a boy again. Margaret did not thank him. She didn't need to. You don't ask questions, she said. Not ones you're not ready to answer. Why? Because I have some I'm not ready to answer either. Something passed between them then. Recognition, maybe, that grief has its own kinsfolk. Outside, the snow thickened. Inside, Sam cut boards and the family mended blankets, and the hotel settled around the idea that it might yet be a home. That night, after the children slept, Margaret stood at the lobby window and watched the street. Sam stacked wood behind the stove and spoke without turning. If Roy comes and asks for what's his, what will you say? The truth, she said, that there is no gold, that whatever Thomas carried out of that mine, he spent on keeping us alive, that his partner loved the money more than the man. Truth doesn't always stop a bullet. No, she agreed, voice steady. But lies invite them. Sam nodded. Then we'll prepare for truth. He barred the doors with a new beam. He set a lantern in the upstairs window, a small star against the storm. He laid his rifle on the counter and checked the sight. Not because he wanted to use it, but because a tool you hope not to need deserves respect. On the counter beside the rifle, he placed the deed, the paper that said Copper Hollow belonged to Samuel Hart. He ran his palm across the ink, as if the warmth of his hand could fix the lines on it. Then he folded it neatly and slipped it back into his pocket, where it felt less like ownership and more like a vow. By dawn, the storm had scoured the streets clean. Copper Hollow looked almost new under the white, unbroken, unmarred, as if history had taken a night off. The hotel's chimney smoked steady again. Jamie's cough came soft and infrequent. Emma laughed once at something Evan said, and the sound startled all of them into smiling. Sam stepped onto the porch and let the cold bite him. From the ridge, the wind carried a sound he'd been expecting since the willow canes snapped. The dull, measured crunch of hooves breaking crusted snow. 3 riders. Not fast. Not slow. A man who wanted to be heard. He went back inside and closed the door, his hand resting a moment on the iron latch. They're coming, he said. Margaret's gaze met his. No panic. Only the kind of courage people learn in rooms like this. Then we'll see what they want most, she answered. Gold, or the power the rumor of it gives them. Sam moved to the doorway between the lobby and dining room, the place where light from the fire met the gray of morning. He felt the weight of the rifle across his palms and the weight of something else in his chest. A quiet, unremarkable resolve. He had come for timber. He had found a family. Someone in need had appeared. He had stepped forward without ceremony. Outside, the hooves came closer. Inside, for people stood together because there was no other way to stand. The morning after the hoofbeats, Sam climbed to the hotel roof with a hammer in his teeth and a roll of tarred canvas over his shoulder. The wind clawed at him, but he worked steady, laying new shingles, sealing the chimney, and stretching the canvas so snow would slide off clean. Below, Emma steadied the ladder, Evan passed nails, and Jamie counted each hammer blow like the numbers could hold the building together. When the roof was done, Sam dragged a fallen spruce into the street, cut it to length, and built a windbreak for the porch. He caulked window frames, sealed gaps with burlap dipped in wax, and kept moving without asking questions. Margaret offered no answers. Every day he arrived before sunup, thawed his hands at the stove, and fixed what the place whispered was failing next. He hauled wood from the draw, chipped ice from the cistern, and stacked supplies in careful piles, never enough to shame a proud woman. Flour, salt, a wedge of cheese, honey, lamp oil. He left at nightfall to sleep in the jailhouse, close enough to hear trouble if it came. Evan stayed close, learning the grain of wood, the right angle for a brace post, the way rope should be burned at the ends. Emma learned how to bank a fire, read smoke, and ration oil. Jamie became inspector, solemnly declaring, "It holds." At every repair, the hotel's smell shifted from dust to pine and coffee. Floors stopped complaining underfoot. Margaret kept her watchful silence. Once, Sam saw her pocket a small iron key tied with a faded red ribbon. Manager's desk? He asked. Among other things, she said. On the fourth day, Sam and Evan dug a trench to guide Spring melt away from the porch. That evening, Margaret set out an extra bowl of stew for whoever might be passing. Sam, coincidentally passing, took the seat. They talked of deer, foxes, and the courthouse bell. Safe topics that made the night feel less cold. In Denver, Pike at the Mercantile teased him for buying so much flour and oil. Sam said nothing, but heard Pike tell another customer, Roy Cutter's sniffing around again, says a widow owes him a chest. Sam filed it away. He began leaving his rifle on the counter, not as a threat, just present. One night Evan came in with snow on his boots and 3 cigarette butts in his hand. Army papers smoked outside the livery. Not Sam's. Sam tossed them in the fire. That night he walked the street, checking every building. He tied twine across the back door of the hotel, set shovels by the steps, and lit a low lantern upstairs. The next day he rode to the East Ridge, chipped ice from the inside bank so wagons would have to slow, and dragged a deadfall across a bypass trail. He wasn't laying traps, just telling the road to think first. Back at the hotel, Emma copied numbers into an old primer. You like sums? Sam asked. I like things that answer, she said. He promised her blank pages from the courthouse ledgers. Later, he tacked a note over the desk. Copper Hollow, property of S. Hart, care of ITS residents. Margaret read it and stood a little straighter. That afternoon, the wind carried the scent of men. Saddle soap, smoke, whiskey. Sam found a gray wool thread caught in the back door. He sharpened the kitchen knives, showed Evan how to brace a door, taught Emma to douse a lamp in 3 counts, and placed Jamie where he could see both the stairs and the front door. Margaret brought out the small cedar chest with iron bands. If he comes, I'll open it. He can call me thief if he likes. Do you want me in the room? Sam asked. Yes. Then I will be. And the children won't. That night, they waited with low lamps and a banked fire. I can't pay you, she said. I'm not billing you. Then what are you doing? Maintenance, Sam said, after a pause. Of more than boards. The first 2 knocks were the wind and a branch. The third was knuckles, deliberate. Evening there, a man called. A neighbor calls. State your name, Sam said. A chuckle. Roy Cutter. Come to settle a debt. Daylight for debts, Sam replied. Sun up here with the book open. Bootsteps retreated. Hoofs crushed the snow. Margaret set the chest down, slid the key into the lock, then removed it again. Tomorrow. Tomorrow, Sam agreed. He fed the fire 2 more logs. Upstairs, Emma's voice called, Ma. We're all right, Margaret answered, meeting Sam's eyes. He nodded once. Outside, the mountains exhaled frost. Inside, the hotel kept its warmth. And in that warmth, without oaths or ceremony, Samuel Hart became part of the household he had meant only to repair. Snow came hard in the night, pressing against doors and burying the street so deep the wooden porch rails vanished to their midpoints. Sam was up before first light, shoveling paths from the hotel to the woodpile, from the livery to the well, from the front door to the middle of Main Street. The air burned his lungs. The sky was the color of a raw blade. By mid-morning, a hush settled, no wind, no snow falling. In that stillness, the sound of hooves carried sharp and clean from the ridge. Sam looked up from the last shovelful in time to see them. 3 riders cresting the rise, black against the pale sweep of the pass. The lead man sat high and easy in the saddle, his coat swinging open to show the silver buckle at his belt. Roy Cutter. He didn't hurry. He let the horses pick their way down, the 2 behind him flanking just far enough to suggest they'd cut off any run. All 3 had rifles slung and sidearms at their hips. They came to the center of Copper Hollow and stopped without dismounting. Cutter's gaze went straight to the hotel. Margaret stood in the doorway, Evan to her right, Emma and Jamie behind her. Sam stepped out of the alley with his rifle across his forearm. Not raised, not hidden. Morning, Cutter called. His voice was smooth, practiced, a salesman's tone in a market with only 1 stall. Mighty fine day for doing right by folks. You're welcome to the weather, Sam said. Cutter's smile didn't touch his eyes. I'm here for what's mine. The lady knows. Chest of gold. Belonged to her husband. Belongs to me now. No gold here, Sam said. By her word, and that's enough. Cutter leaned forward in his saddle. I knew Thomas Lane. He wouldn't leave without tucking away what he earned. She's hid it. His eyes flicked to Margaret. Tell your hired man to stand aside and I'll take what's owed without mess. She's not hiding, Sam said. She's surviving. And you'll speak to me, not through me. One of the riders laughed, short and ugly. The other shifted his horse, hand near his holster. Sam let the muzzle of his rifle tilt toward the snow at Cutter's feet. Town's mine by deed, he said calm. That includes the hotel. You set foot inside without leave, you trespass. You try that armed, you commit more than trespass. Cutter's grin thinned. Paper won't stop a bullet. Neither will greed, Sam answered. You've got until the count of 5 to turn that horse. Margaret's voice, quiet but carrying, came from behind him. If you think there's gold, I'll open the chest. Now. Cutter's brows lifted, surprise chasing across his features before the grin returned. That's more like it. Sam stepped aside just enough for her to pass into the street, the cedar chest in her hands. Snowflakes clung to the iron bands. She set it on a bench, slid the key in, and lifted the lid. Inside, a stack of old Denver newspapers, yellowed and flaking, their dates from years before. On top of them, a folded map inked with trails and hash marks. Cutter stared, blinked, then reached for the map. Sam's rifle lifted a fraction. Cutter's hand froze. That's all? Cutter asked. That's all, Margaret said. Thomas left me this so you'd waste your life chasing it instead of the men who robbed him. The thugs exchanged glances, muttering. The map fluttered in the wind, the ink running where a snowflake landed. This is a joke, one snarled. Sam's voice cut through. Take it and go. The second man spat into the snow. Or we take the woman, search the place ourselves. Evan stepped forward then, his face pale but his eyes hard. He carried the short-handled axe Sam had given him for splitting kindling. You'd have to come through me. Jamie, small but fierce, darted toward the alley where Emma already had a torch to a dry shed. Flames jumped high and fast in the brittle air. Smoke began to roll, black and thick, cutting off the view toward the pass. Your choice, Sam said. Ride now and you've still got the road. Wait, and you'll have the fire and my rifle to reckon with. Cutter's jaw worked. He turned his horse sharply. We'll be back, he said, with more men, and I'll have what's mine. The three rode out, snow spraying under their hooves, the fire crackling loud behind them. Sam and Evan doused the shed once the riders were gone, the smoke drifting into the hills. Inside, Margaret closed the chest and set it back in the office. Her hands shook only after the latch clicked. That bought us a week, she said. Then we'll use it, Sam answered. The days that followed were a tightening of knots. Sam repaired the shed, moved the woodpile closer to the door, and hung a heavy beam across the inside of the hotel's double doors. He walked the ridge each morning, reading the snow for tracks. Twice he found sign of a single horseman, keeping his distance. Margaret kept the children close, lessons and chores done within sight of the lobby. At night, they played cards by lamplight, the windows shuttered. Sam slept in the hotel now, on a cot near the door, the rifle within arm's reach. On the 6th day, a crow flew low over the street and lit on the hitching rail, calling once, sharp. Sam looked toward the ridge and saw movement, slow, deliberate, more than 3 riders this time. He stepped into the street, boots planted in packed snow, rifle in hand. Behind him, the hotel door opened. Margaret stood framed there, Evan to her side, Emma and Jamie behind. The family formed a wall without speaking. The riders crested the rise, Cutter at their head. He slowed when he saw the scene. One man in the street, a family at his back, the hotel solid behind them. The wind carried nothing but the creak of saddle leather and the faint jingle of tack. Sam's voice carried clean across the snow. "This is my town. These are my people. You ride through or you turn back. You don't stop." Cutter's eyes moved from Sam to Margaret, to the children, and back. The stillness between them was a taut wire. Then, with a grunt that might have been disgust or respect, he wheeled his horse. "Not worth the trouble," he said, loud enough for all to hear. The others followed, their silhouettes shrinking against the white until the ridge swallowed them. Sam stayed where he was until they were gone. Only then did he lower the rifle. Margaret stepped to his side. "You think he'll try again?" "Not here," Sam said. "He's got to know now this town's too costly." For the first time since Sam had come to Copper Hollow, Margaret's shoulders eased. Evan let out a breath. Emma smiled, small but real. Jamie's mittened hand found Sam's. They turned together toward the hotel, the door closing behind them on the wind. Outside, the snow fell soft and steady. Inside, the air held the warm, quiet weight of a victory earned without firing a shot. A week had passed since Cutter turned his horse and vanished over the ridge. In that time, Copper Hollow had lain under a heavy, unbroken shroud of winter. Snow fell in slow, relentless silence, day after day, erasing every mark of men and horses from the street. The wind came in sudden bursts, rattling shutters, then vanished again, leaving a stillness so deep that even the sound of the fire inside the hotel seemed loud. Sam Hart rose each morning before the others. He'd stoke the embers, brew coffee in the dented pot, and stand by the front window, peering through the frost. Every day he expected to see a black shape against the white ridge, Cutter returning, maybe with more men. Every day, the ridge stayed empty. The storm that came on the seventh night was the worst yet. Wind howled through the hollow like a wounded animal, shaking the old buildings so hard that nails moaned in their boards. Drifts piled waist-high against the north side of the hotel, burying the lower half of the windows. Sam went out twice in the dark with a lantern to clear the doors, the light throwing small, wavering circles onto walls of snow. His breath came in white bursts, the air so cold it stung his teeth. On the third morning after the storm, the wind died. The world outside was bright and blinding, the kind of light that seemed to cut edges into everything, the roofs, the fence posts, the ridges. Sam shoveled a path from the hotel to the middle of Main Street. His breath rose in slow plumes, the only movement in that frozen silence. He scanned the pass. No riders, no smoke. Just the long sweep of white under the high blue sky. Margaret came to stand beside him on the porch. Her scarf was pulled up over her chin, eyes sharp in the cold. "If he was coming back, it would have been now," she said. Sam didn't look at her, still watching the ridge. "He's out there," he said. "Men like that don't forget. They circle, looking for the weekday." She studied him. "And you think we've had ours?" He shook his head. "Not while we're standing together." That afternoon, Sam did something he hadn't planned. Instead of mending the hotel steps or checking the livery roof, he walked through the drifts to the courthouse. Snow had drifted up the stairs almost to the doorframe. He dug it out with slow, steady strokes, then tested the door. The lock still held. Inside, the air was cold and smelled of dust and old paper. The main hall was dim, lights slanting in from high windows where the glass had gone cloudy with years. Dust motes spun in the beams, disturbed by his steps. He saw the judge's bench at the far end, the clerk's desk with a layer of dust so thick he could trace his name in it. In one corner, a length of rope lay coiled, the bell rope. The leather was cracked, but unbroken. He tipped his head back and saw the shadow of the bell above, bronze gone dark with age. He touched the rope, imagining the sound rolling through Copper Hollow again. Not as a warning like it might have been in the old days, but as a call. That night, over supper, he told Margaret what he'd seen. "The roof's sound enough to last another winter. If we fix the windows and seal the floor gaps, the place could be used again." Margaret set her spoon down. "Used for what? There's no one left to hear the bell." "Not yet," Sam said. "But the ground here's good, the water's close, and the buildings are standing. We could have people again by spring." Her eyes narrowed a little. You came here for timber, Sam. Now you're talking about a town. I came here to survive, he said. Same as you. Maybe surviving means more than just lasting another winter. Maybe it means building something worth the work. Evan leaned forward, elbows on the table. If people came, would we stay? That's your mother's choice, Sam said. Margaret's gaze stayed steady on him. I've been running since Thomas died. Maybe it's time to stop. The next morning, Sam was on the courthouse roof, shoveling off ice and setting new shingles where the wind had torn them. Evan and Emma carried boards up the ladder, Jamie brought nails, and Margaret appeared at midday with bread and hot coffee in a cloth-wrapped basket. They worked until the sun fell low, and when they stepped back, the courthouse looked less like a shell and more like the center of something living. A few days later, Margaret came to find him while he was sorting through ledgers in the courthouse office. She carried something in her hands. A small, heavy key, brass worn smooth by years of use. This was in the hotel safe, she said. Thomas kept it. I never knew why. Sam took it carefully. Courthouse. She nodded. If you're going to make this place part of the town again, you should have it. He turned the key in his fingers. It felt cold but solid, the kind of weight that could anchor a man. You sure? Her voice was quiet, but certain. This is your home now, too. Sam slid the key into his pocket. The motion felt less like taking possession of a building and more like making a promise. The days settled into a rhythm. Mornings were for splitting wood, hauling water, and checking the ridge for signs of riders. Afternoons he spent on repairs, courthouse one day, hotel the next. Evenings they gathered by the fire. Sometimes the children played cards. Sometimes Margaret read from an old book she'd found in the schoolhouse. Outside, winter kept its hold, but inside there was warmth. Not only from the stove, but from the unspoken fact that they were together. One night, Jamie laughed at something Evan said. A clear, bright laugh none of them had heard in months. Emma smiled openly, without the guardedness she'd worn since Sam first met her. Margaret leaned back in her chair, her hands resting still in her lap, as if she'd only just realized she wasn't holding something back. Sam looked around the room, the firelight on their faces, the easy way they moved in each other's company, and felt a quiet settle over him. Not the hollow quiet he'd once kept like a companion, but a quiet that came from belonging. He'd come to Copper Hollow for timber and salvage. Nothing more. He'd found something that couldn't be bought at a Denver auction. People worth standing for, a place worth defending. The snow would keep falling for weeks yet. Cutter might pass this way again someday. But the next time trouble came down the ridge, it wouldn't find a lone man or a hidden family. It would find a town, however small, standing together. And Sam knew that was the difference between enduring and living. The wind cut through Copper Hollow like a knife, carrying with it the brittle hiss of snow sweeping down from the high ridge. The storm had not eased for 3 days, and the drifts along the main street now rose to a man's waist. The buildings, what few still stood, were half buried, their roofs huddled under the weight of winter. The town looked like something time had abandoned, left to sink beneath the cold. Samuel Hart stood at the half-repaired steps of the old courthouse, his gloved hands gripping a length of timber as he wedged it into place. The boards creaked under his boots, but the structure held. For now, every hammer strike echoed through the empty street, swallowed quickly by the snow. He worked without hurry, the steady rhythm of a man who had learned that winter jobs were never really finished, only paused. From the hotel across the way, the door opened just enough to let out a line of warm light. Margaret Lane stepped out into the swirling snow, her coat buttoned high, scarf wound tightly at her neck. Her children followed, Evan carrying a basket, Emma clutching a folded quilt, Jamie dragging a sled with an awkward determination only an 8-year-old could manage. "You'll freeze out here," Sam called over the wind. Margaret smiled faintly as she crossed the street, the snow crunching beneath her boots. "You've been out here all morning," she said. "Thought you could use something warm." Evan handed him the basket. Inside, bread still steaming from the oven, and a jar of pickled carrots sealed with wax. Jamie set the sled upright, revealing a bundle of split firewood tied down with rope. Sam glanced between them and raised an eyebrow. "I thought I was the one keeping you all fed," he said. "You were," Margaret replied. "Now we're keeping you fed." It wasn't the words themselves, but the way she said them, without hesitation, that struck him. Back in October, she wouldn't have taken a single loaf from him without half a dozen reassurances. Now, she was handing him food like it was the most natural thing in the world. Sam carried the basket inside the courthouse, holding the door so they could follow. The air inside was warmer than outside, but only barely. The old potbelly stove in the corner was doing its best against the draft. The main hall was still half-gutted, stripped of rotten planks and old plaster. Piles of salvaged boards leaned against the wall. He'd been working on it since the day after Roy Cutter rode away, deciding without quite deciding that the courthouse would be the first building in Copper Hollow to see a proper repair in years. Margaret walked slowly through the open space, her gloved hand brushing the wall. "This was where my father signed the deed to our first farm," she said quietly. "I was barely tall enough to see over the counter." Sam set the bread on the work table. "Then I guess it's only fitting you're here to see it stand again." She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out something small. An iron key, worn smooth at the edges. She placed it in his hand. "I found it in a desk upstairs at the hotel. It's the courthouse key. Seems to me you're the one who ought to have it now." Sam turned the key over in his palm. It was heavier than it looked, the kind of weight that carried more than metal. He slid it into his coat pocket without comment. Some things didn't need words. Emma wandered to the tall windows, her breath clouding the glass as she looked out at the street. "It's so quiet," she said. "It won't always be," Sam told her. "Not if we do this right." The truth was, Copper Hollow had been dying for years before he ever set foot in it. The mine was played out, the rail spur had been torn up, and most of the people had moved on. What remained were empty buildings, wind, and the occasional scavenger like himself. But after months of living here with the Lanes, working side by side to cut wood, haul water, mend roofs, Sam had begun to see something different. Possibility. "You think people would come back?" Evan asked, setting another piece of wood into the stove. "Not all at once," Sam said. "But folks looking for a fresh start? Somewhere quiet, away from trouble. Maybe they'd stay. If there's shelter. If there's heat." Margaret met his eyes. "And someone to keep them safe?" Sam's jaw tightened. "If it comes to that." The shadow of Roy Cutter still hung over the town, even though he hadn't shown his face since that morning in the street. Sam suspected it wasn't over. Not really. Men like Cutter didn't forget, and they didn't forgive. But the thing that had sent him riding out that day wasn't just Sam's rifle. It was the sight of the family standing behind him, refusing to be moved. That kind of unity was harder to fight than bullets. Outside, the wind eased for a moment, and the snow fell straight down in thick, slow flakes. Jamie had pulled one of the benches over to the stove and was lying on his stomach, poking at the embers with a stick. His laughter, light and unguarded, broke the stillness. Emma joined him, dropping onto the bench with the quilt in her lap. For the first time since Sam had met them, the room felt like something more than shelter. Felt like home. Margaret unwrapped her scarf and moved to stand beside him at the table. "When spring comes, what then?" Sam thought about it. In truth, he hadn't looked that far ahead. The winter had been his whole horizon for so long. Chop enough wood, keep the fire burning, keep the roof from caving in. Spring had always been a season for other people. But now, "We finished the courthouse," he said slowly. "Fix the roof on the general store. Maybe get the hotel back in shape. You know anyone who can bake?" Margaret's lips curved. "I might." They stood in companionable silence for a while, watching the children by the stove. The quiet wasn't empty now. It was full of the scrape of boots on the floor, the soft hiss of snow at the windows, the faint smell of bread mixing with wood smoke. Sam picked up his hammer again, but he didn't start work right away. Instead, he let his gaze drift to the window, where the white street lay still under the falling snow. Copper Hollow was small, empty, and half forgotten. But it was theirs now. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to start something new. When the sun dipped low and the light turned the snow to silver, Margaret gathered the children to head back to the hotel. She paused at the door. "This is your home now, too," she said. Sam didn't answer, just nodded. The key in his pocket was warm against his thigh. As they crossed the street, their laughter trailing behind them, Sam felt the strange, steady warmth that came from knowing the winter wasn't just something to survive anymore. It was something they would outlast. Together.